I'll honor Sarah in my own way. I'm going to go to Sarah's favorite steakhouse with my mom. Even my mom, who is weak from a cold, will cheer up after eating meat.
Despite it being the day of our beloved daughter's funeral, John didn't show up. After calling him multiple times, I finally got through, only for him to say something completely unacceptable. Does he not understand who's responsible for Sarah's death? No matter what I say to John, who lacks the essential qualities of a person and a parent, it won't make any difference. Each word from him only deepens my anger and resentment toward him. And I'm not the only one whose anger is rising. My dad feels the same way.
Now, let's send him to hell.
Without John's presence, we sent Sarah off to heaven peacefully. Yes, it was John's turn next. I'll make sure to send him to hell. No, I'll drag him down myself. I'm Julie, a housewife in my 30s. My daughter, Sarah, just turned 3.
Mommy, I want to go to the big pool again.
The pool? Yeah. The pool is fun, isn't it? Our family consists of Sarah, my husband John, and me, and we love going on outings. Since Sarah was born, John has come up with fun places to visit almost every week. But now that Sarah is 3, our happy little family has started to fall apart.
What? You want to go to that big pool again? Oh no. Let's go to the museum instead. They've got huge dinosaurs there.
As I feared, John wasn't thrilled about going to the pool. Here we go. I sighed softly. Not long ago, if Sarah said she wanted to go to that pool, John would have happily taken her right away. Lately, though, instead of following Sarah's wishes, he's been steering us toward where he wants to go.
I want to see the dinosaurs.
Sarah, still so young, easily changed her mind. If Sarah's okay with it, the museum's fine too, I guess. But I couldn't help feeling bitter. So, are we not going to the pool anymore? I asked quietly, and John nodded as if it were the most obvious thing in the world.
Yeah, that's right. That pool was indoors, so it was great for the winter, but we went a ton when she was under 3. That should be enough.
Another one of Sarah's favorite spots was off the table. Why? Because it wasn't a bargain anymore. Because the pool is free for children up to 3 years old. John loves anything that's a good deal. He always gets vouchers, and he gets 3 or 4 sample items by himself. When we eat out, he picks restaurants where we can use coupons. And even if he really wants something on the menu, he'll settle for whatever's discounted. I used to think he was just a frugal guy with good money sense. But ever since Sarah was born, his penny pinching has gone into overdrive, to the point where he's just plain cheap.
Kids get so many free deals, you know? Let's make sure Sarah has a ton of experiences while we can.
John would look for places that are free or super cheap for kids and take us there. We traveled by plane. We went up to the observation deck of a skyscraper, visited aquariums and zoos, and made so many memories. I was grateful for it, but I never thought that once Sarah turned 3 and those discounts stopped, we'd suddenly stop going altogether. While Sarah is still little, it's not so bad. Even if we can't go to the pool or amusement parks she loves, there are still plenty of fun and affordable places and restaurants to go. But once she starts elementary school, the deals John loves so much pretty much disappear.
Come on, we're going to the park. Hurry up and get ready. Did you pack lunch, honey? Not yet?
Our outings were now limited to parks with no admission fees. After all the places we've taken her to, it's just unfair to stop going once she starts school. After Sarah went to bed, I talked to John. At least once a month, can't we take her somewhere she really wants to go?
Are we having this conversation again? What was the point of taking her to all those places before then? We let her have tons of fun while it was cheap. That's enough. She's had a lifetime of treats already.
John was always so stubborn, never willing to compromise. Having gotten used to the cheaper toddler rates, paying full price now seemed like an unbearable waste to him. It felt like he was satisfied as long as he'd squeezed out every deal while he could. His frugality just kept growing.
Hey, is Sarah sick or something?
One day, when John came home from work, he glanced at Sarah, who was lying down. Yeah, she has a fever and had to stay home from school. She just took her medicine and went to sleep. I put my finger to my lips, signaling John to keep quiet so he wouldn't wake her. John leaned over to look at Sarah's pained face. But then, to my shock, I heard him click his tongue in annoyance.
Don't take her to the doctor for just a cold.
John suddenly raised his voice. I quickly grabbed his arm and pulled him away from Sarah to avoid stressing her even more. Speaking in a low voice, I confronted him. Sarah's sleeping. Keep it down. She has a fever, remember?
Why do I always have to listen to you? You're the one who betrayed me first.
What? John didn't bother hiding his irritation, his right leg bouncing restlessly.
I told you not to take her to the doctor anymore.
That's when it hit me. It's true, John had been lamenting that he couldn't take Sarah to the doctor anymore. Starting this year, Sarah is no longer eligible for free medical assistance. It was definitely a loss, but it was because John's income had gone up and we no longer qualified for the aid. I remembered him joking bitterly about it. That's just ridiculous, right? Going to the doctor and going on outings are two completely different things. Making Sarah suffer through a sickness just because we have to pay for healthcare now is too cruel.
Colds get better with rest. You're making a big deal out of nothing. If the medicine worked and she was bouncing back, I wouldn't mind. But look, she's still in bed. What was the point of paying all that money to see a doctor?
His tone was intimidating, and I was left speechless. He was using his booming voice to force me into submission. I wanted to argue, but I knew that would only make John angrier. More than anything, I just wanted him to be quiet. When I didn't respond, John looked satisfied, like he'd won.
See? There's no point in pointless doctor visits. People like you, with no brains, just put a burden on the healthcare system. A cold gets better with rest. A cut will heal if you spit on it. Don't spoil Sarah.
John's words sounded so self-righteous, but just last year, he'd rush Sarah to the doctor at the slightest sign of a fever. Of course, that was because the visits were free, and it was cheaper than buying over-the-counter medicine.
Man, getting a raise sure is a double-edged sword. Working harder just feels like a loss. I wish I could have had them adjust my salary just right, so we could still get free healthcare for Sarah. Maybe half my pay in cash under the table or something?
That's not possible.
I know that, obviously. I'm joking. You never get my jokes, and you're as rigid as my company.
John scoffed and looked down on me with contempt. When did we stop being equals?
Hey, how about you start working too? You're just lazing around while Sarah's at school, right? Instead of thinking about wasting money on trips and doctor visits.
I'm currently a stay-at-home mom. John switched jobs when Sarah was born. When I quit my job during my pregnancy, John confidently promised to make enough for both of us. With his new job, his income increased a lot, and it was John who asked me to support the household as a stay-at-home mom. So, when he spoke as if I had been slacking off all this time, I was irritated.
Well, since you've been out of the workforce for a while, you probably can only get an easy job. But hey, you could at least make enough to cover Sarah's steak, right? Gotta love those all-you-can-eat steakhouses.
He's the one making the money, so he's the boss. He who earns the money decides how the money is spent. I could tell Don thought that even if I started working, I wouldn't be able to match his income, and he looked down on me for it. Maybe his job change was a mistake. Sure, his income went up, but he'd become overbearing. I was the one who encouraged him to change his job, and I know he struggled in the beginning with the new environment. Fine, I'll work too. Being pushed to go back to work was actually convenient for me. Every time I took Sarah out on a trip, John would glare at me and scold me for wasting money. Even getting some spending money from my dad made John resentful. If I could start working again and earn my own income, I could finally give Sarah the experiences she wanted without worrying. So I returned to work, but things didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped.
Sarah's off school again? Must be nice, you know? You get to skip work with her. I'm so jealous.
On the third day back at work, Sarah caught a cold. Just as she got better, her school had the flu outbreak and had to close temporarily. I felt terrible for already causing trouble at my new jobs.
Are you really making enough to cover the steak with all that time off?
Don't worry. I'll still take her to a steakhouse or even the pool if she wants. I could feel my face contorting with frustration. Unfazed by my glare, John made an absurd suggestion.
Well then, let's go to the all-you-can-eat steakhouse. Let's invite my parents too.
I clenched my teeth so hard it hurt.
You hang out with your dad, but you barely spend any time with my parents. You'd better use your first paycheck to take care of them, okay?
I was so furious I couldn't speak. And I didn't want Sarah, who was in the next room, to hear us arguing. I just couldn't bring myself to start a fight. No, I'm not going.
Fine, whatever. It's probably too expensive for 4 adults and a little kid anyway.
The reason I didn't want to go wasn't because of the cost or because I didn't want to be nice to his parents. It was because I realized that I couldn't stand John anymore. I started thinking about divorce and was planning to talk to my dad, Michael, about it when, once again, Sarah came down with a cold. During parenting, I often feel the frustration of not being able to do things as I want. Even though Sarah only had a mild cough and slight fever, I ended up catching it while caring for her, and now I'm the one with a high fever. It's common for kids to have mild symptoms while the parents get knocked out by the same illness. Hey Sarah, are you okay? It seemed like her fever had gone up at night. When I noticed her dazed expression and touched her, she felt burning hot. She has a really high fever. She was fine during the day. Seeing her unfocused eyes, I got a sinking feeling that I should take her to the hospital immediately. But it was the first day of a long weekend, and it was late at night.
Wait, you really want to take her to the hospital now? Isn't that a bit much for just a fever?
I asked John for help, but his response was exactly what I expected.
If you're taking her to the hospital, can't it wait until the weekend's over? If we go now, it's going to cost extra for the holiday or late night fees, right? A cold will get better with rest.
It's as if John didn't even see Sarah. Sarah wasn't even complaining about her discomfort. She was already slipping into a dazed state. Even when I called out to her, her response was faint. Just take her. I don't care about the money. I'll pay for everything. Please, take her to the hospital. I wanted to carry her there myself, but I felt too weak. As much as I hated begging the man I was thinking of divorcing, I couldn't afford pride when it came to Sarah.
Fine, I'll go.
After pleading desperately, John reluctantly agreed. They'll probably diagnose her with a cold, give her something to bring the fever down, and we'll come back. John will be angry, but I don't care. I'm leaving him anyway. If he makes a fuss about wasting money, I'll throw the cash right in his face. These thoughts ran through my mind as I closed my eyes. But after a short while, I heard hurried footsteps approaching. It was too soon for them to have returned from the hospital. It was John who rushed into the room. Seeing his pale face, a chill ran down my spine.
Something's wrong with Sarah.
In that moment, everything fell apart. Sarah was only 7, just 7 years old. The little girl, so full of hope for her future, is no longer with us. On the night Sarah had that high fever, John didn't take her to the hospital. He decided she'd be fine and just let her sleep. But her condition worsened quickly, and Sarah passed away in the blink of an eye. This must be a bad dream. I couldn't even bring myself to blame John. I couldn't accept the reality of it. My dad has been running around, taking care of everything, while I feel like I'm watching it all happen to someone else. Even though Sarah's funeral is about to happen, it still doesn't feel real.
Julie, I know it's hard, but you need to stay strong. Today is an important day to say goodbye to Sarah.
My dad's words snapped me out of my daze. If Sarah is watching me from somewhere, she won't be able to rest in peace if I'm like this. As her mother, I want to do everything I can for her, one last time. Thank you, Dad. You're right. If I cry, it'll only make Sarah worry.
Yes, and your mom is in heaven too. She'll be there to look after Sarah, her first grandchild. By the way, could you try calling John again? I've been trying over and over, but I can't get through.
John, feeling overwhelmed after Sarah's death, went back to his parents' house. I didn't mind. I hadn't felt the need for him to be with me anyway. My dad, though, seemed puzzled by the distance between us as a couple. But losing his grandchild and dealing with everything, he didn't have time to ask for details. Just as my dad said, I looked around and there was no sign of John. John's parents were not there either. I kept thinking over and over, what if we had gone to the hospital that night? John must be suffering too. Maybe he's also emotionally shattered to be here. But still, it felt wrong for Sarah's father, John, to be absent from her farewell. I tried calling John's phone several times. Each time, it just kept ringing with no answer. After about a dozen attempts, I was about to give up when finally he picked up.
How many times are you gonna call? It's creepy.
I had been worrying about how to approach John, knowing he was likely devastated, but it seemed my concern was unnecessary. His voice was sharp and dripping with annoyance. I raised my voice in response. John, where are you? Sarah's funeral has already started. Hearing me, my dad came closer, gesturing to ask if I had finally gotten through to John. I nodded, and my dad leaned in, trying to gauge the situation.
Yeah, no can do.
John's words were cold, barely pausing as he continued.
Mom has a cold, so I brought her to the hospital.
What?
My dad froze. Unaware that my dad was listening, John kept going.
The funeral, it could have been kept simple, but I'm sure Michael's making it a big deal. Is that really for Sarah? Or is it just for his pride? What a waste.
My dad stood there, stunned, as if stabbed in the heart. He couldn't believe the words coming from John, whom he thought was drowning in grief. Even I, who had given up expecting anything from John, found his cruelty hard to accept. I lost any desire to convince him to attend the funeral. So you ignored Sarah. But you're rushing your mom to the hospital, right? I couldn't help but throw in a sarcastic remark.
My mom's old. She's not like a kid who can just sleep off a cold.
But Sarah, I started, but John cut me off, raising his voice even louder.
I said I'm sorry. I've been reflecting, okay? I'm hurting too. Stop acting like you're the only one suffering.
No matter what I said, it wouldn't reach John. As a person, as a father, he was missing something essential. All I felt was growing hatred, wounded by his heartlessness.
I'll honor Sarah in my own way. I'm going to go to Sarah's favorite steakhouse with my mom. Even my mom, who is weak from a cold, will cheer up after eating meat. Oh, and just tell Michael that I'm too grief-stricken and bedridden, so I can't make it.
As I stood there speechless, my dad gently patted my shoulder. Shaking his head, he silently urged me not to engage with John anymore. He took the phone from my hand and ended the call. I wanted to curse John out, but the words wouldn't come, and I felt a bitter frustration. I wanted to cry for Sarah, but instead, the tears came from my anger toward John.
There's no need to cry over someone like him. First, we'll send Sarah off properly. Then we'll make him cry all he wants.
The fire of anger burned in my dad's eyes. It finally dawned on me that I wasn't carrying the grief of losing Sarah or the anger toward John alone. Without John's presence, we were able to send Sarah off to heaven peacefully.
Now, let's send him to hell.
Yes, it was John's turn next. I'll make sure to send him to hell. No, I'll drag him down myself. After taking his bereavement leave, John returned to work from his parents' house. He walked in with a slight hunch, dragging his feet, but forcing a half smile on the right side of his face. He played the role of the grieving father, trying to soldier on despite his loss.
Sorry for taking time off so suddenly.
John apologized as soon as he entered his department. His forced smile was painfully obvious. Everyone around him seemed unsure how to react, and the atmosphere turned awkward.
Yeah, sorry for being away so long.
John called out to a nearby colleague as he made his way to his desk.
Hope things didn't fall behind while I was out. I'll work hard to make up for it.
Pretending to be full of energy, John slumped heavily into his chair. The other employees averted their eyes, unsure of how to interact with him. John, misunderstanding the awkward glances as sympathy, thought they were feeling sorry for him.
Thanks for your concern. As you can see, I'm doing just fine. So don't worry about me. Let's get back to work.
He clapped his hands to get everyone back on track. He's the head of this department. In just 7 years since switching jobs, he's rapidly climbed the ranks. From the outside, he might even appear to be a remarkable leader, holding his head high despite going through tough times.
Work? But John, you are already.
One of the younger employees mumbled awkwardly. John seemed pleased with all the attention he was getting. He allowed himself a brief smirk before quickly shrugging his shoulders and putting on a sad smile.
I'm okay now. Of course, it's sad about my daughter, but it was a sudden illness, nothing we could do. But hey, we're both in our 30s, so we still have time. The best way to move past grief is to have another child. I've got to work hard to prepare for that. Come on, let's get back to work. Time to focus.
No matter how much John tried to play the good father and boss, rallying the team, it was pointless. He was the only one who didn't understand the heavy atmosphere. I couldn't take it anymore and quietly stood up.
Wait, Julie, why are you here?
Caught up in his self-pity, John hadn't noticed that I'd been standing in the corner of the room the whole time. He looked down awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable. Since Sarah passed, we hadn't faced each other properly. Maybe John felt some guilt, as he had been avoiding me by staying at his parents' house.
Get out of here. If my wife barges in like this, it's going to disrupt the work environment. It's making things awkward for everyone.
In response to John's quiet growl, I calmly replied, "Why should I leave? I'm not an outsider. Employees can be anywhere in the office without issue." John bit his lip. "That's right. I work at the same company as John. Up until now, I had avoided his department because he didn't like us crossing paths at work. But today, I had a reason to be here. And by the way, the one who needs to leave is you, John. You're the one causing disruptions by being here."
What?
John looked up, and our eyes locked. It had been a while since I'd seen his face, and he looked as healthy as ever, not a sign of wear or exhaustion. Physically and mentally, he seemed in perfect health. "You're fired. You're done, John. This company doesn't need you anymore. Leave right now."
What?
John's well-nourished, plump cheeks twitched slightly.
Fired? What do you mean? You don't have the authority to do that.
His voice, hoarse and caught in his throat, only added to his pitiful appearance. At that moment, the door opened and someone stepped into the room.
I do have the authority to fire you.
It was my dad, Michael. John, who must have already sensed the worst coming, collapsed weakly. My dad spoke slowly, deliberately, and coldly, his voice sending chills through the room.
You're fired.
The weight of my dad's words, filled with quiet rage, hit John hard, draining the color from his face. The truth is, both John and I worked for my dad's company. My mom had passed away before our marriage, and my dad, a hard-working man who never interfered in our daily lives, was my only family. For John, this distance likely felt ideal. Whenever the three of us met, my dad would always instruct me.
John is a good head of the family. He's working hard. Make sure you both support and respect each other.
John conveniently interpreted that as meaning he, as the head of the family, was the one who should be respected. In reality, my dad meant that since both of us were working hard at our jobs and raising our child, we should appreciate each other and support one another as a couple. Though my mom had passed before my marriage, my dad had adored her. He was the kind of man who would take over the dishwashing duties, claiming he didn't want my mom's hands to get rough. Without knowing this side of him, one might mistake my dad for an old-fashioned and stern patriarch. I realized that John had misinterpreted my stern, old-fashioned dad, assuming that he believed in the idea that men were superior. John convinced himself that, as a man, my dad was on his side. Because of that, John thought he could get away with treating me poorly, as long as he put on a good front in front of my dad. He naively believed it wouldn't be a problem. But reality wasn't so kind.
You're fired.
Hearing that word from the very man he trusted, John couldn't comprehend it. He glanced around, trying to escape my dad's piercing gaze, but all he found were cold stares from the other employees. The confusion from the people around, which John had mistaken as concern for him, suddenly made sense. They realized it had been a complete misunderstanding. His dismissal had already been communicated within the company. The only one foolish enough to still believe he had a place there was John himself.
This can't be.
John trembled, now cornered, his body shaking with fear. I braced myself, expecting John to desperately apologize or explain himself, but instead, he bared his teeth unexpectedly.
This is wrongful termination. Julie must have lied and made me look like the villain.
With tears in his eyes, John launched into an impassioned speech.
You're just making me the bad guy to deal with your grief over losing Sarah. Sarah died from a sudden illness, and there was nothing anyone could have done. Why does it seem like you're the victim, and I'm the one at fault? Losing a child is hard on both parents. You're not the only one suffering here.
John's voice boomed as he finished, panting from the outburst. No matter how much he shouted, it didn't shake me. You're right. I'm not the victim. Sarah is. I had already explained everything to my dad. I hadn't planned on revealing the full story to people at work, but since John brought it up, I had no choice. When Sarah had a high fever and was lethargic, I begged John to take her to the hospital. But he refused because he didn't want to spend the money. He abandoned her to save a few $1,000s. If we had gone to the hospital sooner, maybe, just maybe, Sarah would still be with us. The room buzzed with murmurs.
No, it's not my fault. It was late, and it was a long weekend. You can't just run to the hospital for a fever and waste everyone's time.
John pleaded, trying to shake off the growing contempt directed at him. But it only made things worse. John had always been good at putting on a nice front. He loved bragging about how he'd take Sarah out on fun trips. And after the weekend, he'd always say, "I'm exhausted, but it's worth it for my daughter's smile." He even liked to mention how he'd rush her to the hospital for a mild fever or minor scrape. For someone who had always painted himself as a loving family man, his excuse of it was just a fever wasn't holding up. Everyone was starting to realize that he really had abandoned his child. The position of authority John had worked so hard to build at work was crumbling beneath him. John scratched his head in frustration and stomped his feet like a child.
But I didn't realize Sarah's condition was that serious. How was I supposed to know? And now, just because of one mistake, you're kicking me out of the company? That's terrible. This is wrongful termination, abusing your power. I'm a victim too.
There are some mistakes you can never come back from. And this wasn't a personal grudge or an unfair dismissal. Everyone in the room knew the truth. John had skipped his own daughter's funeral. Many of our colleagues had come to pay their respects to Sarah, and they had all noticed John's absence. If he had been too grief-stricken to attend, maybe people would have found it in their hearts to forgive him. But the reality? People saw you, at the Steakhouse, the day of Sarah's funeral, enjoying a meal.
What?
Not only did John skip the funeral, but he also went out to eat steak with his mom. He mentioned it over the phone, but it sounded so absurd that I thought he must have been joking. However, on the way back from the funeral, one of our coworkers spotted John at the Steakhouse. In disbelief, they reported it to me and my dad. At that moment, I felt nothing but shame and humiliation to have someone like him as my husband.
No, that's a mistake. They must have seen someone else. I was too upset to eat anything. I couldn't possibly have eaten steak.
But John's true colors had shown, and it was a relief. He didn't deserve an ounce of sympathy. Is that so? Then explain this receipt. I waved the receipt in the air, the one John had submitted to accounting. You tried to expense this, didn't you? But it's not going to work. You didn't take a client to that steakhouse, did you? And on the day of Sarah's funeral, no less.
Oh my.
John rushed toward me to snatch the receipt, but my dad grabbed him by the shoulder. For a moment, John raised his right fist, but the watchful eyes around him kept him in check.
It seems you've been submitting personal receipts as company expenses for a while now. One of the accounting staff, unable to bear the guilt, reported it to me. They suspected your receipts for a while, but didn't dare challenge you since you're married to the future president.
My dad moved closer to John, his voice steady and cold.
You've been taking advantage of your position as my son-in-law, doing as you please. I had high hopes for you, John, but I can't let someone guilty of such misconduct take over the company. In fact, I can't even keep you employed. You're fired.
The weight of my dad's words hit John hard, and his legs trembled. John had been penny pinching, expensing personal meals and purchases. He might have enjoyed the perks for a while, but now the cost was far greater than he had imagined.
What the hell? Everyone's ganging up on me. It's just a few $1,000s for the steak, no big deal. What a stingy company. I'm done with you.
John muttered bitterly, his tough words only making him look more pitiful. No matter how much he tried to act tough, it was just pathetic. The people around him looked at him with pity, realizing what a lost cause he truly was. Feeling the pressure of having no allies, John's face turned red as he shouted,
Fine. I'm leaving.
He tried to act tough, but it was like watching a tantrum-throwing toddler. As he stomped toward the door, I called out to him, "Where are you going?" He spun around, eyes wide with anger.
Home.
John shouted as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It seemed like he was planning to go home and drown his sorrows in alcohol. Really? Well, if you're heading home, make sure to go back to your parents. Because our home, it's no longer yours.
What?
His once angry eyes went wide with shock. As his rage turned into confusion, I calmly delivered the truth. I sold the house. You can't go back there.
Why did you sell it without telling me?
The house we lived in had been purchased by my dad.
It was in my name. Why would it be wrong for me to sell my house?
John's face flushed with anger, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief.
What? You can't just sell the house I lived in. That's our family home. It's full of memories.
Hearing the word family come out of his mouth was utterly disgusting. The man who had destroyed our family had no right to use it as an excuse. It's exactly because the house is filled with memories that I can't live there. But someone like you, who only has superficial kindness, wouldn't understand how I feel. John was right. It was a home filled with precious memories. And that's exactly why everywhere I look, I see Sarah. Sarah, who is no longer in this world. There's no way I can continue living in the room where Sarah passed away, pretending as if nothing happened.
But I have rights too.
As John clung to his argument, I handed him a piece of paper. Divorce me.
What?
I don't need you in my life anymore. How could someone who didn't care about their own child's happiness and abandoned their responsibilities have any rights? Compared to what Sarah lost her life, John losing his job, future position, social standing, money, and house is insignificant. He cried and screamed, unable to appreciate that at least he still had his health.
Why are you doing this? Are you happy now that you've taken everything from me?
Happy? Of course not. I gave him a look of utter disdain. Realizing how foolish he looked, John, humiliated, left in a huff, muttering curses under his breath. After Sarah passed away, John realized just how much more he cared about money than his own child. After Sarah passed away, it seemed that John was initially upset and felt some sense of responsibility. Unable to face me, he ran off to his parents' house. That much I could have forgiven. But what I didn't expect was the kind of encouragement he received from his parents.
So, what's happening with Sarah's insurance money? Remember how we got that policy ages ago? I didn't think we'd need coverage for Sarah, But you couldn't say no back then. What's going on with that?
A few days after the divorce, he called me with this conversation. You want the insurance money? When I asked directly, John laughed.
Well, yeah. I mean, I should get my share, right? I wouldn't want you keeping it all to yourself without saying anything.
I was too stunned to respond. As I stayed silent, John started explaining his plan.
Thanks to you, my family's been dealing with a lot of trouble. We were actually planning to have my parents move in with us to help you, since you're so vulnerable. But then you went and sold the house without saying anything.
I didn't know about this supposed plan, but I felt relief knowing I had sold the house.
Mom was really looking forward to living together. But now, not only is the house gone, I've lost my job, and we got divorced. You really did a number on me. No severance, no alimony. At least give me the insurance money.
His voice wasn't just angry. There was panic in it too. As I began to piece it together, he tried to tug at my sympathy.
My parents' house is a rental, Getting fired was a huge shock, and I figured I could lay low at their place for a while. But then the landlord showed up, demanding they pay the overdue rent.
Apparently, his parents had been behind on rent. Maybe the landlord had been lenient because of their age, but with John crashing there, they decided to collect.
How am I supposed to pay back rent without a job?
You have savings. Even though I coldly brushed him off, I could hear John sniffle.
Yeah, but once I pay the rent, they said we'd have to move out. My savings won't be enough to cover the move.
We'd split our savings during the divorce. In exchange for me not suing him for embezzlement, John had been forced to return the money he stole from the company. Still, he should have about $10,000 left.
But you don't get it. Even though it's a rental, Dad went and remodeled the place himself. Now, we have to pay the back rent and fix the walls he tore down, the attic room he added, everything. That's going to wipe out my savings in no time.
John pleaded desperately, but I felt nothing. Come to think of it, his parents' house did have an eccentric design. It was charming in its way. I had no idea they had remodeled a rented house without permission. It was a perfect metaphor for John, nice on the outside, a disaster underneath. Like father, like son, selfish and short-sighted. The three of them can go to hell together. By the way, I was the beneficiary of Sarah's life insurance policy, the last bit of hope John clung to. At the time, I couldn't say no to the insurance, so John had complained quite a bit. That's why he had no say in it. So, you want a share of Sarah's insurance money? I was the one who took out the policy, paid for it with my savings, and I'm the beneficiary. There's no way any of this money is going to you. I ended the conversation quickly and hung up the phone. After that, John continued to call frequently, but he never had the guts to show up at the office. Maybe he still felt some shame, or perhaps he didn't want to tarnish the memory of the time when he was respected as a boss. Eventually, John's calls stopped altogether. One of the gossiping employees did some digging and found out that his parents' house had already been rented out. It seemed they had settled the overdue rent and paid more than their savings could cover for repairs before moving out. Even when I learned this, I didn't feel a shred of concern or sympathy. His present and future have nothing to do with me, and I'm not interested at all. Though I cut him off with resolve, the pain in my heart still aches. It's not as if getting rid of John brought me any sense of relief.
Julie, how about we take a day off and go somewhere together?
One day, my dad gently suggested it. After the divorce, I had moved back home, kept working as usual, and lived my life as if nothing had changed. But it seemed my dad could tell that I was still feeling down.
I understand how sad you must feel. For parents, their children are more important than themselves. You always prayed for Sarah's happiness, didn't you?
My dad's kind voice was comforting.
As a parent, I just want to see you smile, Julie.
It hit me suddenly. I'm Sarah's parent, but I'm also my dad's child. When I looked up at him, he was smiling the same gentle smile I had always seen when I was a little girl.
Julie, let's go out and have fun. Just the two of us, like old times.
Yeah, Dad. The one who can truly heal me is my dad, my family. My name is Suzanne Johnson, 29 years old. I've been married for 3 years to my husband, Bob. He's 3 years older than me, and I met him in college. We were happy at the beginning, but now our relationship has grown cold. Is it because of what happened with the baby? It probably started when, 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant but ended up having a miscarriage. No, my baby. The doctor explained that it was a rare occurrence, but we had been so looking forward to the birth that it was hard to recover. On top of that, Bob blamed me for the miscarriage.
What? We were so excited about this baby. Did you do something to cause this?
Bob's parents were furious with him and showed concern for me, which helped me gradually recover. But Bob remained cold toward me. He started spending less and less time at home, using work as an excuse. Then, a few months after my miscarriage, my 31-year-old sister Helen gave birth to a baby girl.
I had a healthy baby girl. Isn't she cute? Make sure you give us a generous gift.
Hearing about Helen's birth announcement, even though she was supposed to be single, made me feel down. She's not married, so whose baby is it? Why did she get to have a healthy baby while I lost mine? Helen has always treated me as if she could boss me around, so we've grown distant, and I've come to dislike her. I should be happy about the baby's birth, but Helen asking for money makes it feel awkward. Still, if I didn't give her the gift she demanded, she'd cause a fuss later. So I gave more than the usual amount and kept my distance. 2 years passed, and Bob and I rarely spoke. Honestly, I often wondered why we were still married. Then one day, I found out that Bob and Helen were having an affair. If my niece is Bob's child, then this affair started right after our marriage? No way. I thought we were still a proper couple back then. Have I been betrayed this whole time? I can't keep living like this. Divorce? But I'm close to my in-laws, and I don't want to cut ties with them. But Bob is cheating on me. I had already lost my feelings for Bob, but I cherished his family, so I hesitated to get a divorce. However, one day, I suddenly learned that his parents had died. A fire took their lives? No, I was supposed to meet them today. I was overwhelmed by a deep sense of loss, but immediately tried to call Bob. Hello, something terrible has happened.
Stop calling me so many times. I told you not to contact me today. I'm on a trip with my parents to give back to them. Let me enjoy this time.
When he finally picked up, he hung up on me without even hearing what I had to say. I completely lost hope in Bob. I decided to divorce him and swore to get revenge. Bob had left for a trip yesterday.
I want to take my parents on a trip while they're still healthy. It's a 3-day trip, so make sure you keep up with the housework.
He usually said it was for work, but this time he told me not to bother him as he was taking his parents on a trip. However, I knew it was actually a secret trip with Helen and their child. How dare you use your parents as an excuse for your affair? I've had enough. I couldn't just leave things as they were, so I had arranged to meet his parents today to tell them about Bob. But then the fire happened. I almost broke down at the sudden news of their deaths, but my anger towards Bob kept me standing. He says he wants to give back to his parents, but he won't even listen to important matters. If he misses the funeral, it's on him. He'll regret this later. Since discovering the affair, I had packed the minimum necessary things. I'm glad I prepared just in case. He never checks his phone anyway, so I'll just leave a note. I left a note in the living room saying I was going to his grandparents' place, took my belongings, and left, never to return to this house again.
Suzanne, glad you made it. When will Bob be here?
His grandmother, who was preparing for the funeral, noticed me and called out. Well, he can't make it to the wake or the funeral. Realizing it was his parents' funeral made me sad all over again. You see, Bob told me he was going on a trip with his parents yesterday.
What?
Huh? But they were at home.
I also checked with the two of them, so Bob was lying. He went on a secret trip with my sister. I revealed Bob's affair to his grandparents, showing them the evidence recorded on my phone. I discovered Bob's affair purely by chance. He only comes home to eat dinner and sleep. Is there any point in being married like this? I work from home doing office work.
I can't do housework, but I'll try my best. Right now, I can't do anything without you, Suzanne, but I'll make it so you won't have to do any housework someday.
I'll teach you well, so I'm counting on you. That's what he said when we first got married. Even though I knew Bob was good at his job but lacked basic life skills, he was willing to learn and was gradually getting better. I started working from home to take care of the house, but without a commute, I can work more efficiently. I thought I'd go back to an office job once Bob got better at housework, but maybe I should just keep working from home. Bob was apparently an excellent salesperson at a major company, so he often came home late, leaving most of the housework to me.
Thanks for everything. The lunches you make are a big help. You must be tired, but can you teach me how to do housework on weekends?
Bob was always thoughtful and tried to learn housework, so I didn't see any problems. But after the miscarriage, Bob started coming home even later and working on weekends more often. We used to talk and enjoy meals together, but now he's silent. The atmosphere is tense, and whenever he does talk, it's just complaints about my cooking or criticism. How did it end up like this? At one point, I thought it was my fault. But as this lifestyle dragged on, I began to think something was off. Is it normal for work to suddenly get busier like this? It doesn't make sense for it to stay that way forever. He's also being stingy with household expenses. What's he spending it on? If he's just working, our income should be increasing. Bob earned more than me, so he had been contributing more to the household budget. But suddenly, he reduced the amount he was giving for living expenses.
You're the only one staying at home, right? I'm hardly ever here. I buy my own stuff. Do I really need to pay for living expenses? This much should be enough, right?
In that case, let's discuss it while going over the expenses. I was shocked by Bob's attitude, but I nervously suggested that we should have a proper discussion. However, Bob snapped back irritably.
What's there to discuss? You work from home, but I'm out there working as a salesperson, moving around all day. I work for a big company, but you just work for an ordinary one. You've got it a lot easier than me. You're working from home, so you're using the house money. I don't use it, so why should I be paying?
He got angry, and in the end, the amount he contributed to the household expenses became even less. If it had just been me, I would have blamed myself and not thought there was anything wrong. But Bob's parents were on my side.
I'm so sorry for my foolish son. It's not your fault. What on earth has happened to Bob?
If he can't protect his wife, what kind of husband is he? You're both working, but you're doing all the housework, right? He's never done housework at home. And yet, he doesn't protect you.
He wasn't like this in the past.
This isn't your responsibility. I always thought he was a considerate person.
Sometimes even his grandparents would join us, and the 5 of us would go out together. We had grown close. It seemed that all 4 of them couldn't forgive Bob for blaming me when I was devastated by the miscarriage. They really are good people. Bob used to be like this too, so why did he suddenly change? Even if the miscarriage was the trigger, if he didn't want to be with me, he could have just suggested a divorce. Thanks to his parents, I was able to think clearly and began to quietly observe Bob's behavior, which seemed suspicious. There's nothing suspicious in Bob's room. If there's anything, it might be in the bag he carries around. I subtly looked into things but found nothing, yet my suspicion remained. So it felt natural to peek at the notifications on his phone while he was in a deep sleep. That's when I discovered his affair with Helen. A message from Helen? Wanting to spend time together as a family. Does that mean Helen's child is Bob's? I used his finger while he was sleeping to unlock his phone, and I was stunned by what I found. We were married when that child was born, right? I thought everything was going well, but was he cheating on me this whole time? Is he staying away from home because he has a child with Helen? When we visited my parents' house, Bob would play with Helen's child and seemed to love her. I thought after a while, he'd want kids again, and we could go back to the way we used to be. Was he just showing affection because she was his own child? So he was lying about business trips to be with Helen. Bob and Helen's messages were like those of a married couple, planning their schedules and enjoying their time together. Helen knew Bob was my husband, so why? Wait, did she do it on purpose because he's my husband? Honestly, Helen had always taken my things and made fun of me, so I wasn't shocked to learn she was the mistress. But still, I had trusted Bob, so the betrayal stung. He was cheating on me. How could he cheat with my sister? Well, our marriage was already cold. Maybe it's time for a divorce. But if I do that, I'll lose the bond I've built with his parents. Because of my relationship with his family, I couldn't bring myself to consider divorce, but I took photos of all their phone exchanges as evidence. Since then, I've been monitoring Bob's phone, so I also recorded his and Helen's plans for the trip this time.
No way.
What? That jerk.
His grandparents were furious with Bob and also with Helen, who could do such a terrible thing. He didn't even listen when I told him about his parents' funeral. He'll probably be back tomorrow night. I don't want to be with him anymore, so I plan to file for divorce after the funeral.
That's the right choice. You shouldn't waste your life on someone like him.
If you need anything, we'll help. This can't be tolerated.
His grandparents nodded firmly. For now, we focused on ensuring the funeral was conducted smoothly. The following night, after all the preparations and notifications to relatives were finally completed, we were resting together at his grandparents' houses. Suddenly, Bob stormed in, looking furious.
What the hell are you doing here? Neglecting the houses? Stop bothering Grandpa and Grandma and get back home now.
When you suddenly disappeared, we got a call. Stop causing trouble for everyone.
Helen, holding her secret child, tried to feign innocence as she complained to me. Before I could respond, his grandfather furiously grabbed Bob.
You're the one causing trouble for everyone.
Ah, Grandpa, what's going on?
What's going on? You hung up on Suzanne without hearing her out. Everyone was suspicious during the funeral because their son wasn't there.
Wait, funeral? What are you talking about?
The house is burned down completely. Your mom and dad have passed away. I explained to Bob as I felt tears well up again.
No, they died?
Bob seemed to realize it wasn't a lie from our expressions and was shocked.
Then why didn't you tell me? You should have said something, Grandpa. Why do you believe her? She's lying.
He started blaming me, ignoring his own faults.
How dare you? I'm disappointed in you.
His grandfather scolded Bob. I have proof. Listen to this. I played the recorded phone call for Bob.
Why were you recording our calls?
I always record phone calls for work. Sometimes I get instructions over the phone, and having them recorded makes it easier to verify things. Since working from home, I started using a recording app.
Being a dutiful son, huh? Your actual parents died in the fire. So who were you really with? And that person with you is Suzanne's sister, right? Why are you with her?
Even Bob's kind grandmother accused him, leaving him dumbfounded. Though he tried to make excuses, the recording clearly captured his voice saying, "I'm on a trip with my parents to give back to them. Let me enjoy this time," proving he was completely lying. You didn't want me interrupting your trip, right? Because you were on a secret getaway with Helen.
What are you suddenly accusing me of?
Helen, perhaps knowing her affair was wrong, tried to claim her innocence.
Yeah, she's your own sister. And how could you suspect me of cheating? That's just cruel.
Bob also acted like a victim, pretending there was no truth to it. But I showed them the records of their interactions saved on my phone. Can you still say that after seeing this?
What? What is this? Did you look through my phone without permission? Just because we're married, you think you can do anything?
Bob was shocked, but quickly turned the blame on to me.
You're the one who's messed up, acting all high and mighty when you're the one cheating.
His grandfather, enraged, slapped Bob hard.
I'm not in the wrong. Suzanne is always gloomy and couldn't even have kids. She doesn't even care about how she looks. Being around her just exhausts me.
Bob still claimed he was innocent and started acting out.
How dare you? Don't play the victim when you fail to help your struggling wife. Cheaters always have selfish excuses.
His grandfather easily restrained Bob. Having been a police officer, he had retired but kept in shape. So he held Bob down and began scolding him.
Do you know how much Suzanne has suffered until now? Losing a child is hardest on the mother, and you ran away to cheat.
We tried contacting you yesterday, but you wouldn't answer, so we asked Suzanne to reach out. You ignored her call when your own parents died and kept fooling around. Is that all your parents meant to you?
Even the usually calm grandparents were emotional and angry, likely because of their son's passing.
She should have told me right away.
Bob initially lashed out, but gradually quieted down under the intensity of their anger. Helen, too, who had only met his grandparents a few times, shrank back, observing the situation nervously. Once they finished their scolding, I finally declared my intention to divorce. Bob, I'm divorcing you. You cheated, so I'm obviously going to demand compensation.
Fine. Our marriage barely felt like one anyway, and the compensation won't be much. I've always wanted to live with my own child.
Finally, we can live together. Bob has a good salary, and I'm in sales too, so we make more than average. Unlike you with your regular jobs, we have money.
Bob and Helen seemed to think it was no big deal.
Let's get married right after the divorce.
Yeah, finally, We can live the life I've dreamed of with our child.
They started talking about their future together, completely lost in their own world.
There's no way we'll approve of your marriage. Cheating with your sister's husband and having a child. What are you thinking?
I didn't think you'd go this far. You've lost all my respect.
What? Mom? Dad? Why?
Helen was shocked at the sudden voices of our parents. The truth was, when Bob and Helen had arrived, his grandparents had called my parents on their phones. I have something to discuss about Bob and Helen. I wanted to talk when things settled down. I had originally planned to consult his parents, and I had told mine the same. They had stayed silent for a while as requested, but finally couldn't hold back anymore.
Actually, I knew Bob from work. We've been acquainted for quite some time. And if things weren't going well with Suzanne, wouldn't marrying me solve everything?
What kind of nerve do you have? Saying that after cheating.
Helen tried to justify herself, but of course, no one took her side. Then my mom spoke up.
You were always bragging on social media, weren't you? I was shocked to see pictures of your grandchild on your posts. Raising a child should cost money, but you've been buying all sorts of expensive things. Why? And you were just using the kid to get attention online, weren't you? Sure, the pictures were cute, but it made me sick to watch.
My mom had previously asked me about starting a side business using social media. I had taught her how to use it, which is how she came across Helen's posts. It's true, she's bragging a lot. The posts were full of Helen showing off her belongings and her child. It's not that she's treating the child poorly, but it does seem like she's using the child, which makes me uncomfortable. But this also made me understand the situation with the secret child a bit more. She's only 2, but she's unusually quiet. Was it not just her personality, but also Helen's treatment that's off? Even now, with everyone yelling around her, she doesn't cry. Can that just be chalked up to her being quiet? I feel uneasy about Helen raising her child. Even now, she's still splurging on brand name goods. Helen used to take my things without regard and lack concern for others. She's living like she's still single even with a child. It doesn't feel like she's fully embraced motherhood. When you have kids, your appearance tends to take a hit compared to when you're single, right? Yet she's still fully made up and dressed in expensive clothes. Helen had said before,
I'm in the sales department now, so I have to look good. You should care more too. First impressions matter, so you need to spend money on your appearance. And your belongings should be high-end too.
There was some truth to her thinking, but it was overboard. And I often wondered how she managed to live alone like that. There's no way she could handle parenting in this state. So I followed my mom's lead in criticizing Helen. You're a mother now, but you're still living like you did when you were single? Are you serious about raising your child?
You don't get to lecture me. You couldn't even have kids, so stop acting all high and mighty.
Helen brought up my miscarriage to retort against me. Shouldn't you, of all people, understand how painful that is as a mother? I frowned at Helen's words, and both my mother and his grandmother got angry.
What are you saying? You, of all people, should know how much Suzanne suffered as her sister.
I can't trust you with a child.
What? Are you trying to ruin my happiness? And you're supposed to be my family.
You cheated with your sister's husband and even had a child. You have no right to say that. And you always leave the child with us on the weekends, saying it's for work. We're practically raising her for you.
Helen plays the victim, but it doesn't convince anyone. What? She's been having our parents take care of her child this whole time? So she was having an affair with Bob while they babysat. And she has the nerve to complain about how hard it is to raise a child? Since having her child, whenever Helen spoke to me, it was always without any consideration for my feelings.
Having your own kid is just the best. This little one is so calm and easy to take care of. She's such a thoughtful child. Oh, but you wouldn't understand that, would you?
Bob, too, showed no concern for me. While doting on his secret child, he would say things that seemed like subtle jabs at me.
She's so adorable. I always wanted kids once we got married, you know?
He knows how I felt, right? Why would he say that? Bob's words deeply hurt and saddened me. If not for the support of his parents, I would have continued to blame myself. But they're not here anymore. As I thought about it, I couldn't understand Bob's selfish whining, insisting he was not at fault. He's just staying quiet because he has nothing to say, right? He doesn't seem to be mourning his parents' death more than his own issues. Helen only met his parents once, but even when you hear that someone you know has passed away, shouldn't you be more affected? They're both so self-centered. Can these two really raise a child properly? It wasn't just me who thought this. My mother did too.
Fine. If you want to get married, go ahead. But we'll take custody of our grandchild. I don't think you two can raise a child.
This child is mine.
Then do it all by yourself without using us as a daycare.
Exactly. Bob was never the kind of man who could protect Suzanne even when they were married. I doubt he can protect a child now.
His grandfather glared at Bob as he spoke.
Bob never did housework, did he? Even if they say they'll raise the child together, they'll likely give up quickly. You can't deny it, can you? You were already cheating when things got tough during your marriage.
Initially, they insisted they could raise the child, but it seemed they found some truth in what everyone was saying.
Fine, you can have her. If I want another one, I'll just have one.
Yeah, starting a new life now, we won't have time to take care of a child anyway. Sure, take her.
They handed over the child to us without much resistance and prepared to leave. I'll be demanding alimony from both of you. I have the evidence, so you can't act like it never happened. I made sure to assert myself.
We'll pay it right away.
Do you even know how much I earn? I'm in sales and have been promoted, so I'll pay you quickly. You're just obsessed with money.
They laughed at me as they left the house. After that, I went to my parents' home, completed the necessary procedures for adopting the secret child, and finalizing the divorce. I started living alone near my parents' house, occasionally visiting my niece. At first, she was so quiet, but as I interacted with her more, she started to smile more often. My niece had hardly spoken before, but she has recently started calling my name and happily comes to me when she notices me. It must have been hard for this child to be with Helen and Bob. She's such a sweet kid, not like those two. I want to make sure she can live peacefully from now on. Knowing she was born out of an affair made it complicated, but I decided to love her as my niece. Later, while I was waiting for the alimony to be paid, I received a phone call from Bob and Helen.
Hey, what the hell? Why is the alimony so high?
Yeah, we just got married and our life is just starting. Paying that much will make things really tough.
Apparently, the amount was much higher than they had expected, and they couldn't accept it. I have proof of your affair, so that amount is fair. You said you earned more than me, so it should be easy, right?
I've already spent so much. It's not enough. It'll take months' worth of salary. Even if I sell the stuff I bought for Helen, it won't be enough.
Isn't it a lie that the alimony costs that much? How are we supposed to enjoy our lives?
It seems Bob had spent a considerable amount of money on Helen and had no savings, and Helen had used up most of her earnings on leisure activities.
We didn't get a single penny from my parents' inheritance. I'm their son, so I should have gotten something.
They had been counting on his parents' inheritance, and this infuriated me. A son who didn't even attend the funeral doesn't get any inheritance. His grandparents are still healthy, and they trust them more than they would a cheater like Bob. How can he care more about money than his own parents? I realized I could never see eye to eye with Bob, who wasn't even mourning his parents. He continued with his selfish complaints.
Well, when we had the child, we received assistance from the government, but now that's gone. We shouldn't have given her up. Give her back now. She's my child.
What do you think your child is? A tool for getting money. There's no way I'll return her to such parents. Helen saw her child as nothing more than a means to get money, and it made my anger boil. She wants the child back for such a reason? There's no way she'll raise her properly. She's finally starting to smile more lately, but seeing Helen would ruin that. I felt frustration about how such people could even have a child when others couldn't. As I thought about this, they continued to complain.
All the relatives are cold toward us. Even if we try hard, paying the alimony is going to make things tough. You're single and well off, so you don't need to take the alimony, right?
Strange rumors are going around at work, and it's getting hard to get a promotion. My salary might even go down. Please.
You cheated, so of course, I'll take alimony. The relatives were all furious that you, their son, didn't attend the funeral.
You told them we went on a trip and didn't come back, didn't you? You should have covered it up better.
You're the one who hung up without listening to what I had to say.
Okay, I was wrong. But please, drop the alimony. He can't do any housework, and it's making things really hard for me. We don't have any savings, and it's even tough to buy food. We might become homeless if we can't pay rent. Wouldn't you feel bad if your sister ended up like that?
Helen cried, but I felt no sympathy. You brought this on yourselves, didn't you? Bob said he learned to do housework, but gave up because he found it too troublesome. You chose him, Helen. You need to take responsibility for what you did. I will get that alimony from you. And then I hung up without waiting for a response. I blocked both of their numbers and asked my lawyer to make sure they paid the alimony. After further explanation from the lawyer and more scolding from both his grandparents and my parents, they finally paid the alimony. It seems they even had to take out loans to pay it all at once. And with the situation now fully known at their workplace, they found it hard to stay there.
If I leave this place, where else can I find a job?
Helen is apparently holding on for dear life.
I can find a new job right away. I'll pay off the debt and live comfortably.
Bob quit his job and tried to find another one, but it seems he hasn't had any luck.
If you hadn't quit, we'd still have more money than we do now.
I thought I'd find a better place.
In the end, Bob couldn't secure a full-time job and is getting by with part-time work, and the two of them are constantly fighting. As for me, I'm enjoying my time while working and taking care of my niece. She's Helen's child, but she's so much cuter than Helen ever was. I still think it would be nice to have my own child someday. My niece has been smiling more lately. She's so adorable that I've started to want my own child again, even though I had given up on the idea. I thought I was sick of marriage, but if I meet the right person, maybe I'll get married again. While living a peaceful life, I hope that someday I'll remarry and raise children together with a supportive partner.
All right, now that Dad's gone, I'll be the one to distribute the inheritance.
After my husband David passed away and the funeral was over, our eldest son, Mike, immediately started talking about the inheritance.
What? Why should you be the one to do it?
Seeing the puzzled look on the face of his younger brother Kevin, Mike gave a sly smile.
Well, Dad's death was so sudden, he didn't leave a will, right? So, as the eldest, it's up to me to distribute it.
At Mike's words, I could only stare in astonishment.
First, I'll inherit all of Dad's real estate. Mom can have this house, and Kevin will get whatever's in Dad's bank account.
I exploded at Mike's selfish words. All this time, David had been sending money every month to support Mike and his wife because of their carelessness with finances. Yet, Mike seemed to forget all the kindness, not even mourning David's death, but only focusing on money. At that moment, Kevin made a suggestion to me. And it was then I decided to get back at the selfish couple. My name is Laura, and I'm 75 years old. I've been married to my husband, David, a former office worker, for 50 years. I gave birth to our eldest son, Mike, when I was 27. Experiencing childbirth and parenting for the first time was a series of unfamiliar challenges, and it was so hard that I almost gave up. 3 years later, I gave birth to our second son, Kevin. You might think the second time around would be easier with some experience, but instead, the parenting struggles just doubled with the addition of another child. Raising 2 boys was, even in retrospect, an exhausting daily ordeal. However, once the kids got married and it was just David and me again, I began to miss those busy days. Though just an office worker, David earned enough to support our family of 4 comfortably, so we never struggled financially. After the kids graduated from college and our household finances eased, David started investing in real estate. I don't know the details, but he's made arrangements to ensure we have income for our retirement, so he wants me to feel secure. I respected and trusted David so much, and I thought we were set for a peaceful retirement without financial worries. However, reality wasn't so kind. Our serious son, Mike, failed his job search and started spending his days drinking and wasting money. Mike had always been a good student and attended the highest-ranked high school in our county, where he maintained decent grades. The neighbors praised him as a son to be proud of, and he seemed pleased about it too. For college, he moved to New York and attended a fairly well-known private university. As parents, we were proud of Mike and had no doubts he would land a job at a reputable company. However, once he left his hometown for New York, Mike was hit with the reality. There were many people who were more capable than him, and despite attending numerous job interviews at prestigious companies, he failed each one. Eventually, he returned home and got a job at a decent company. Apparently, a few of his middle school classmates worked at the same company. He ended up working under a classmate who had attended a much less competitive high school and had entered the workforce sooner after junior college. Whether this hurt Mike's pride or not, he began to drink to the point of losing his memory daily.
Mike, it's bad for your health to drink so much. Stop it.
What? Shut up, old man. Just lend me some money instead. My salary's too low to even go out drinking.
I just lent you money recently. I can afford to lend you tens of thousands of dollars every time.
Then Mike smashed the glass he was holding.
So you have a money to spare, but you won't lend any to your own son. I get it. You don't care about me because I failed in my career. Sorry for not being your pride and joy.
That's not true at all.
So you'll lend it to me, right?
David pondered for a moment and reluctantly handed Mike some money. Being physically large and strong, I couldn't oppose Mike, and all I could do was clean up the broken glass. Mike seems to feel inferior to his younger brother, Kevin. Kevin graduated from the school at a local national university and is now working as a lawyer. Both Mike, who works in a general company, and Kevin, who works as a lawyer, are precious sons to me. I think they are both admirable. However, no matter how much I say this to Mike, he just pushes me back. Kevin married a woman he had been dating since college and now lives nearby. However, Mike, even past the age of 30, still spends his days drinking and is flamboyant with women. Bad rumors about him have started spreading around the neighborhood. As he was living his life by borrowing more than $1,000 from David every month, I couldn't help but feel anxious about his future. Then, when Mike turned 38, he brought home a woman named Mary, saying he wanted to marry her.
Meeting Mary changed me. I've been too dependent on you guys until now. But from today, as a man, I plan to take care of Mary.
Seeing Mike smile calmly, I was relieved that he had finally changed for the better. Mary was 23 years old, 15 years younger than Mike. At the time, marriages with a significant age difference were rare, and I had my concerns. However, I was overjoyed that Mike wanted to be independent, and I blessed their marriage. But that was a mistake. Mary turned out to be very extravagant with money. 2 weeks after they got married, Mike and Mary came to our house and asked for money.
We're planning a honeymoon trip, but we're short on cash. Could you lend us some?
Where are you planning to go?
Mary wants to go to Italy.
Mike and Mary were looking at each other happily.
Italy's far and travel is expensive, right? Why not choose something more within your means, like a domestic trip?
What? A domestic trip for a honeymoon? Unbelievable. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Isn't it normal to fly first class to go abroad? David, you're wealthy, why are you being stingy? If you have the money, just lend it to us right away.
Mary said this without any shame. Mike didn't reprimand her. Instead, he nodded deeply in agreement with her words.
Really, Dad has always been stingy. You have the money, so stop being so tight. Mom and you don't really spend much anyway, right?
Exactly. It's a waste not to use money, we'll spend it for you.
Seeing Mary's beaming smile gave me a headache. Mary was unlike anyone I had ever met before, and I didn't know how to deal with her. The two of them wouldn't listen and kept saying it was natural for David, who has money, to share it with them since they don't have any. Not just for the honeymoon, but they would often run out of money and come to our house asking for loans. Before I knew it, David had started sending money to Mike and Mary every month, like an allowance.
When will this kind of life end?
David was exhausted as he muttered that. Although our younger son Kevin tried to talk sense into Mike, Mike avoided him, wouldn't answer calls, and didn't reply to emails. Ultimately, even after Mike turned 40, David continued the financial support. Suddenly, that way of life came to an abrupt end. David passed away from an aortic dissection without any warning. I couldn't accept this sudden departure. No matter what I was doing, memories of David would flood back, and I couldn't stop the tears. While I was consumed by grief, it was Kevin who took care of the funeral arrangements and other necessary tasks. Despite his own grief, Kevin managed everything from arranging the funeral home to contacting relatives, ensuring the funeral went smoothly. Surrounded by former colleagues, neighbors, and longtime friends, David was sent off to heaven. Then, back home from the funeral home, as we sat drinking tea as a family, Mike suddenly stood up.
All right, now that Dad's gone, I'll be the one to distribute the inheritance.
What? Why should you be the one to do it?
Well, Dad's death was so sudden, he didn't leave a will, right? So, as the eldest, it's up to me to distribute it.
I was dumbstruck and could only stare at Mike as he spoke.
First, I'll inherit all of Dad's real estate. Mom can have this house, and Kevin will get whatever's in Dad's bank account.
There isn't much money in David's account. At most, about $5,000. The several $100,000 David had saved over the years as a frugal man had all been converted into allowances for Mike and Mary. Mike is aware of this and is probably trying to leave Kevin with only the small amount of money in the account for inheritance.
Kevin is making good money anyway, right? No problem for him. And Mom, you don't have much longer to go, so you don't need money, and I'll take it. Okay.
I exploded at Mike's selfish words. So, no more financial support from now on.
What? Old lady, you might as well drop dead too.
At Mary's words, Kevin sighed deeply. Then he said something shocking.
All right, then. Mom and I will do without any inheritance. We'll renounce our claims.
Kevin, what are you saying?
It's okay.
As I raised my voice in surprise, Kevin whispered in my ear.
I don't really need the money, and I'll take care of you, Mom. Let Mike and Mary have all of Dad's estate. They can even live in this house if they want to.
At Kevin's words, Mike's eyes lit up.
Kevin sure is understanding. Just don't come back later asking for a share of the inheritance. Okay.
Of course. Just one condition. Can I handle the inheritance proceedings? I know plenty of accountants.
No problem at all. That's actually perfect. With Dad's estate, we can live it up.
Yeah, there's a bag I've been wanting. And I want to go on a trip.
Mike and Mary went home discussing all the things they wanted to do with the inheritance. I glared at Kevin. Why would you say something like that? Even after Dad died, Mike shows no sadness and only thinks about money. I don't want him to have any inheritance, and this house is filled with precious memories.
It's okay. I have a plan.
Kevin was smirking as he said that.
Let's get back at Mike.
And then, Kevin began to describe his plan for revenge. I was speechless at what he proposed.
You'll help me, won't you, Mom?
I nodded immediately. After all this time, Mike has squandered David's money and hasn't even shown grief at his passing. I no longer love Mike as a son. I was resolved to teach him a harsh lesson. 3 months later, I had moved into Kevin and his wife's house.
All the inheritance is settled, and all of Dad's estate has gone to Mike.
So, everything is ready.
It's all good.
Kevin spoke confidently as we slowly sipped coffee after breakfast. Just then, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. The monitor showed Mike and Mary.
Mike, what brings you here early on a Sunday morning?
It's not about what brings me here. What's this about?
Suddenly, Mike's angry voice boomed. Kevin, unfazed and relaxed, responded,
Don't shout. You're disturbing the neighbors. I'm coming to open the door. Just wait.
When Kevin opened the door, there stood Mike and Mary, looking furious.
Hey, I got a collection notice from the bank. What's this about?
Exactly. We haven't borrowed any money from the bank.
When I called the bank, they said it was money Dad had borrowed. But why do I have to pay it? Explain.
Mike demanded, his face red with anger.
That's obvious, isn't it? Because you inherited Dad's estate.
What? So why am I losing money because I inherited it? It's not about inheritance tax, is it?
Yeah. Besides the inheritance tax, you'll also have to deal with the debts Dad owed. The collection notice is asking for repayment of those debts.
Dad had debts. What are you talking about? Dad was wealthy, wasn't he? His apartments were worth millions of dollars, and he was making tens of thousands every month in rent.
Kevin shrugged in exasperation.
He wasn't exactly in debt. He had taken out loans. It's common among those who invest in real estate. You borrow money from the bank to buy properties and then pay it back with a rental income.
On the day of Dad's funeral, after Mike and Mary had left, Kevin had told me about David's debts. Just 2 months before he passed, he had purchased an apartment worth over $500,000 and had a substantial amount to repay to the bank. Debts are also inherited, so it was suggested that it might be better to renounce the inheritance, and I asked Kevin to handle the proceedings.
If Mom and I claim the inheritance as well, the debt would have been split 3 ways. But since you wanted to inherit everything, Mike, you end up inheriting all the debts as well.
What? What's that all about? Pretending to be rich, but actually just borrowing from the bank. What a pretentious old man.
How can you say such a thing? As I glared at Mary for her words, she clicked her tongue loudly.
Don't get so mad. It's not just any debt. It was a loan. There's rental income, so just make the monthly payments.
It's because we don't have that kind of money that I'm angry. We thought we were going to get a lot of money and even went on a trip yesterday.
We've already spent all our savings, so we don't have any money to pay the bank. You guys should pay it instead.
Ignoring Mike and Mary's demands, Kevin tilted his head.
Why should I have to pay? Isn't the rental income due soon?
We can't wait for that. There are also credit card bills, and it's not enough.
That's your responsibility for spending all the money, isn't it? Why do Mom and I have to clean up your mess?
At Kevin's exasperated tone, Mike and Mary frowned.
Stop acting so superior. You've always belittled me. Don't look down on me.
I'm not looking down on you. It's just common sense, isn't it? If you don't live within your means, you'll end up regretting it.
At Kevin's words, Mike twisted his face in frustration.
I've got it.
At that moment, Mary, who was next to Mike, smiled broadly as she said that.
If there's debt anyway, maybe we should just renounce the inheritance, right? If Laura could do it, so can Mike.
Exactly. You're smart. I'll renounce the inheritance too. Kevin, you handle the paperwork.
At Mike's words, Kevin grinned mischievously.
Unfortunately, you can no longer renounce the inheritance. You can only do so within 3 months. It's been over 3 months since Dad passed away, so Mike, you have no choice but to inherit everything.
What? That's unfair.
That's right. Just getting yourselves out of the debt, you cowards.
I had to suppress my laughter as Mike and Mary stomped their feet in frustration. I hadn't expected everything to go exactly as Kevin had said. Kevin had intentionally waited until the 3 months passed, claiming that the inheritance procedures were taking time to make sure Mike would inherit everything, including the debts. And the moment the 3 months were up, he informed them about the estate, ensuring they couldn't renounce the inheritance.
Legally, only Mike needs to pay back the debt, so we're out of it. If repayment is tough, why not sell the condo and turn it into cash?
If we do that, we'll lose the passive income.
That's true. You either continue paying the mortgage with a rental income or sell the condo now and pay off the debt. It's up to you to decide, Mike.
Mike was fidgeting irritably.
Now that you understand what the collection notice means, can you leave? It's still early in the morning, and I don't want my day off ruined.
At this, Mike and Mary started to panic.
Wait, the discussion isn't over. We don't have money right now. Please, just pay for this month instead.
Sorry, but that's impossible. I've got big expenses this month too.
Don't say that. We're brothers, aren't we? Brothers should help each other out. Kevin, you have a good income and extra money, right?
Then Kevin laughed out loud.
Is that something you, who only thinks of himself, should say, Mike? Weren't you the one who wanted a bigger share of the inheritance? You didn't even help with the funeral arrangements and only bring up being brothers when it suits you.
That's...
Sorry, but I'm not earning money for you, Mike. Dad might have given you money, but I won't be providing any financial support.
Kevin said this as he looked straight at Mike. Despite all the insults Mike had hurled at him over the years, Kevin had never talked back. But it seemed he had been holding back stress all this time. The tone of Kevin's voice, colder than I had ever heard, revealed how much he disliked Mike, who did nothing but play and never made any effort. When Mike realized Kevin wouldn't help, he turned to me in desperation.
Mom, please, can you lend me just a little money?
No way.
Don't say that. I have an idea. Let's live together. Then we can use your pension to pay the bank, and you won't have to worry about your living expenses, right?
Mary looked at me with sparkling eyes as if she had just proposed a brilliant plan, but I had reached my limit. Cut it out. How could I possibly live with someone who told me to just drop dead?
Mary was just joking. Mom, she couldn't have been serious.
Yes, it was just a joke. Don't be mad.
Mike and Mary were sweating as they desperately grabbed my shoulders.
Mom, you must be worried about your retirement, right? you've been a homemaker all your life, so you probably don't have much savings. And I'm working so we won't struggle for food or shelter.
Sorry, but I'm not struggling for money.
What? What do you mean?
Perplexed, Mike and Mary demanded an explanation. Actually, David allowed any leftover money I received for living expenses to be deposited into my account. He told me I could spend it as I pleased, but since I didn't really want anything, it just kept accumulating. Now I have nearly $200,000 saved.
If you have that much money, then lend some to me. Your son is struggling here, Mom.
I was dismayed by Mike's pleading. Can you stop? You didn't even grieve when David passed away, so don't call yourself my son. I told you I won't assist you financially anymore, so I'm not giving you any money.
Please, listen, I've been quiet about it, but I have debts. I wanted a larger inheritance to pay them off. I'm already struggling to make the repayments, and I can't afford to take on Dad's debts too.
I wasn't really surprised by Mike's sudden confession. Despite having an income of around $30,000, he went on overseas trips and dressed in branded clothes from head to toe. I thought the money David lent him wouldn't have been enough. No wonder you're always thinking about money. If you have debt, you should be living more modestly and focusing on paying it back. Despite their debts, Mike and Mary were indulging in luxuries like buying designer bags. They probably used the money they got from David to pay off their debts. It seems they were naively thinking that once they got the inheritance, they could pay off all their debts and then relax.
Mom, help me out. I admit I've been bad in the past. We'll take care of you in your old age. We'll do anything.
I don't need you to look after me in my old age. I have enough money to afford a nursing home, and I have Kevin.
That's right. Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you. Mike, you should just think about yourself.
Damn it. Why is this happening?
Mike pounded the floor with his fists repeatedly. Kevin grabbed his arm and led him to the entrance.
Can you please not involve us anymore? Bye now.
Hey, are you really kicking us out? The conversation isn't over yet. At least lend me the money for this month's debt repayment.
Kevin and I exchanged exasperated glances. All the debts are your responsibility. If you had discussed this with us sooner, we could have helped a bit more, but we can't be kind to someone who tries to swindle money like you.
By the way, even if we're family, lying to borrow money and not paying it back could be considered fraud. You should be grateful you're not being sued.
Fraud. That's not what I intended at all.
Mary covered her mouth and trembled. After realizing what they had done, Mike and Mary quieted down, and Kevin pushed them out the door.
Wait, Kevin, Mom, I was wrong. Please help me.
Please. Don't be mean. Forgive me. I'm sorry.
Mike and Mary were apologizing loudly like schoolchildren, but we didn't respond at all. Perhaps embarrassed by the neighbors' glances, they reluctantly went back home. It seems Mike and Mary ended up selling the condo. But as Kevin predicted, the selling price was lower than the purchase price, and they still have about $50,000 in debt left. Originally, Mike had about $200,000 in debt and seems to have filed for bankruptcy due to difficulty in repaying it. Their house, car, and designer items were seized, and now they're living in a rundown apartment without a bath. And when Mary, who was only after the money, realized they wouldn't get the inheritance, she immediately asked Mike for a divorce.
You can't just divorce me when things get tough.
Mike refused to divorce. They are still arguing about whether to divorce or not, and the situation seems to have gotten quite messy. And I, surprisingly, was able to get back the house I shared with David. The house was put up for sale, and Kevin bought it for me. Honestly, it's a bit old because it's been years since it was built, but it's a precious home where I lived with David and our children. I'm really happy to be able to spend time again in this irreplaceable home. Concerned about me living alone, Kevin and his wife come to visit every week, and my happy life has returned. Honestly, I still get sad thinking about David, but I hold on to the happy memories and cherish the rest of my life.
I'm Ashley, 28 years old. I got married to a colleague who had been working at the same company before me about 2 years ago. My husband Noah, who is 2 years older, was the one who made the first confession of love. We couldn't have children for a while after getting married, but thinking it was about time given our ages, we started trying to conceive and successfully became pregnant. We're expecting the baby by the end of this year. Now that my morning sickness has settled, I've entered the stable mid-pregnancy stage, so I'm starting to think about various preparations for childbirth. I lost my parents early, so I am deeply grateful to his parents, George and Madeline. They are also eagerly looking forward to the birth of their first grandchild. They live quite in the countryside, so we don't get to meet often, but they always say, you have to take good care of yourself. Make sure you eat well to give birth to a healthy baby, and send us nutritious foods and fresh vegetables and fruits they grow themselves. Thanks to them, I've recently gained a bit of weight, probably because I've been enjoying too many fresh veggies and fruits now that I'm in the stable period. I have older sister. Her name is Patricia, 32 years old. She's already married and has a cute daughter. My 3-year-old niece, Emily. Noah's big brother, Harry, who is the same age with Patricia, adores her and is already declaring, I'm not letting her marry off, and anyone who asks for her hand in marriage, I'll knock him out. Patricia just laughs it off, saying, silly, isn't he? Well, it's a lively but good family. Now that I'm pregnant, my sister has become a great mentor, offering me advice.
Ask me anything you don't know, okay?
Since she's experienced, I'm looking forward to learning a lot from her. She also has some baby items she no longer uses, which could help with our expenses. When I go to the gynecologist, my sister Patricia accompanies me. Our doctor, Victoria, is a seasoned female physician. She is kind and trustworthy. Once, we even had Noah join in for a lecture.
First of all, the pregnant woman is the center of everything. Her needs come first.
Oh yeah, is that so?
Noah looked nervous.
Of course, I'm not saying the husband should do all the housework. Pregnant women need some exercise too. However, you shouldn't let her carry heavy items or reach for things on high shelves. Let her exercise moderately, but don't overdo it. That's the basic rule.
I see.
Noah nodded to the doctor's explanation. Don't worry, I can handle cooking and shopping. So, it would help if you could assist with cleaning and laundry. I straightforwardly asked Noah for help.
Well, that's not much different from now. Leave the heavy shopping to me.
He responds with a smile. It makes me genuinely happy that Noah is so proactive in saying such things. I quit my job after getting married, and now I work part-time at a local supermarket, cashiering and stocking shelves for about 3 to 4 hours, 3 days a week, which is easy on my body. Many coworkers who have given birth before are considerate and offer advice. Recently, Noah's job has become busier. Since we worked at the same company, I am familiar with what he does. It's a clerical work, so except for the fiscal year end, there shouldn't be much overtime.
I've been busy because I started a new department. I was put in charge along with some younger colleagues, and they made me the leader.
But I'm worried about him overdoing it.
I have to try hard because I'm going to be a dad.
Just don't overdo it.
Yeah, I'm taking breaks appropriately, so I'm okay.
He reassured me. Then, one day, I got a call from my cousin.
Hey Ashley, I need some advice.
His name is Thomas. He is 2 years younger than me and just got married last year. His wife is Alice. They were classmates and have been dating since high school. He recently found out she's pregnant and often consults me, since I have a bit more experience. So, what do you want to know?
Well, Alice's morning sickness is really bad, and it's hard to watch because she's suffering. She can't eat anything because she can't stand the smell of bread. What should I do?
Silly, isn't it? If she can't eat bread, let her eat cake, right?
That's like saying let them eat cake by Marie Antoinette, or a cake logic. Anyway, seriously, tell me, how were you at that time?
I just gave up on things that smelled bad and ate what I wanted to eat. Also, I made sure to drink plenty of fluids. Oh yeah, having mint-flavored chewing gum or candy helped me feel better.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Ashley. If anything else comes up, I'll call you.
If my older sister Patricia is mentoring me about childbirth, then my cousin Thomas is my protege. Our houses are close, and since he runs his own business, it's easy for him to find time, so we had many opportunities to meet even before he was married. On the other hand, my husband Noah started working more weekends, saying it was due to his job. He wanted to sort through the documents he collected during the week all at once on his days off. Lately, we've been spending less time together, and I've felt Noah's attitude changing. One night, upset about his frequent holiday work, I complained. Can't you do something about work? You said you'd support me with the housework, but I'm doing it all. My belly has grown so much that even cutting my nails has become a challenge.
This is an important time for my job. Couldn't you support me a bit?
Instead of just ignoring my requests, he started demanding support from me. I understand, but it's hard for me too. My belly is already this big.
I'm trying hard for our child too. Don't just push your own agenda on me. And
what?
I heard you've been meeting a man outside recently.
What? A man? Oh, that's just my cousin Thomas. He helps me with shopping when you're not around.
Cousin, really? It seems like you've been meeting him several times for a while now.
He's family, so of course we meet.
Well, just bear with it a little longer.
We remained somewhat strained as the due date approached. Then the labor pains started, and I headed to the hospital. Patricia accompanied me to the hospital.
The birth canal is already open. So let's go straight to preparations for delivery. After you give birth, you'll be admitted for postnatal care.
Patricia contacted Noah, but he said he was too busy with work to attend the birth or help with the hospital preparations. So, Patricia took care of all the hospital preparations. 5 hours after arriving at the hospital, I successfully gave birth to a baby boy. Despite the excruciating pain, the midwife said it was a very smooth delivery, and seeing my baby's cute face even made me think it was a good experience. That night, Noah came to the hospital.
Give Ashley some praise for her hard work. You should hold him too.
The doctor Victoria spoke to Noah with a smile. I was exhausted in bed, but I imagined Noah's happy face. However, Noah didn't smile and remained silent even as he looked at the baby. Then, Noah muttered something.
Is this really my child?
What? What are you saying? Is that your first question? I was dumbfounded.
He'll grow on her.
Trying to compose myself, I followed up with what Victoria had said. This is our child. Let's work hard to raise him. Even so, Noah was expressionless. Then, suddenly, he said,
Doctor, I have a request. Please do a DNA test on the baby.
What? I was speechless at Noah's words. For a moment, I didn't understand what was happening. Considering a DNA testing, does he really doubt he's the father? That's ridiculous. Victoria was also taken aback.
Well, we can do that, but that's not something you should say on the day of the birth.
She tried to dismiss him, but
Please, by all means.
Noah was adamant and requested the test. Do you doubt me? That's terrible. Really terrible. Postpartum pain forgotten. I shouted loudly.
I just want to know the truth. If it confirms the child is really mine, that's all that matters. I'll be relieved. Or is there some reason you're worried about the test?
Is he suggesting I have something to hide? Really terrible. I'm not asking for gratitude, but demanding a DNA test all of a sudden is the worst. Sensing the futile argument brewing, Victoria intervened.
Let's do the test.
She agreed, albeit reluctantly. I was unhappy, but since I knew the child was definitely mine and Noah's, I decided to accept the challenge if he insisted that far. When Noah left the room, I broke down in tears. I had thought Noah would be happy. Instead, the fact that he doubted me enough to demand a DNA test. Later, as Noah had requested, we did the DNA test and decided to discuss the results when Noah visited the hospital the following weekend. On the day of the report, Noah appeared unusually calm. In the hospital room, Victoria pulled out the report.
I'll just tell you the conclusion.
Okay.
The result of the test shows that the likelihood that Noah is the father of the boy is...
Victoria paused to take a breath, then announced.
0%. This child is not Noah's biological son.
What? I was speechless and nearly fainted. That can't be. I can't think of any reason why. Yet, how could this be? My mind went blank. Noah smirked and said,
I knew it.
Then he said triumphantly,
You're trying to pin a child from an affair on me, aren't you?
And then he pointed at me.
I want a divorce. You're entirely to blame. I'm going to demand a hefty alimony, So be prepared.
With those parting words, he left the hospital room. I was left utterly dumbfounded. I consulted with Patricia and Thomas. Patricia listened to my story quietly and then became indignant.
Being falsely accused like this, it's no joke. We need to give him a taste of his own medicine.
Yeah, I've got it all covered, so you can rest easy. Ashley,
Thomas said, smirking confidently.
This isn't a comforting conversation.
Patricia was angry.
yeah, right.
Thomas chuckled, seemingly amused. I couldn't tell if they were serious or just enjoying my misfortune. Later, I got a call from Noah.
I've decided to go through with the divorce. My parents agreed to. I'm the victim here, so I'll be seeking alimony. Maybe around $30,000.
I'm thinking of leaving it to a lawyer. Is that okay? I informed him.
Fine, but you're paying for the childbirth expenses yourself. I'm not spending a dime on someone else's kid.
Have it your way.
Yeah, I will do as I please. I'm a stranger now. If you can't pay the alimony, I'll take the house and land. As the victim, I have that right.
Noah was adamantly aggressive. That house and land are inheritance from my deceased parents.
I don't care. Anyway, I'm busy preparing for the divorce. I'll contact you again.
I reported Noah's call to Patricia and then we proceeded with our next plan. I was soon to be discharged from the hospital, and my cousin Thomas came to pick me up in his car.
Good job. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling much better, but I have to keep going for this little one's sake. I gazed down at the small life wrapped in a baby blanket.
Right, I've got it all covered. Let's give that no of yours double, no, triple payback.
We talked about this as we arrived home. My house, which I hadn't seen in a while, looked completely different. Noah had moved all his belongings out. The empty room only had the baby items I had prepared left behind. And there was a note from my husband. The note read, "I'm leaving the house. I won't come back. I'm not returning to my parents' house either, so don't bother looking for me. Only contact me if necessary." If he wasn't going back to his parents' house, I knew where he was headed. Really, he's quick with things like this. I sighed in exasperation. Shortly after, I received a call from Noah. Perfect timing. As soon as I answered, Noah yelled out,
What do you think you're doing? Sending that stuff to my office.
"Oh, about that. Well, since you wouldn't tell me where you are, I had to send it to your office, right?" I responded nonchalantly.
How could you? My boss demanded an explanation, and I had to tell him about our divorce. Thanks to you, the whole office knows, and now everyone is looking at me strangely.
It seemed my plan had indeed caused a stir around Noah. "It's none of my concern. You saw the contents, right? Make sure you come to the lawyer's office. Don't try to run away."
Woo's running away. You'd better be prepared to. I'm ready to fight this through.
Apparently, the notice of content arranged by the lawyer had reached his company. I can just imagine Noah panicking. Yes, Noah's encirclement is nearly complete. And then, we had a discussion about the divorce at the lawyer's office. Noah's parents were also present. I was accompanied by my sister Patricia and her husband. Her husband is Harry. Harry, who works in construction, treats me like his own sister. And then the discussion began. Ashley cheated and had a child, then tried to pass it off as mine and raise it on my money. This is highly malicious, so I demand not only alimony but also compensation for the house and land in Ashley's name. This was Noah's main reason and condition for the divorce. Oh wow, he's quite bold. I was fully prepared and at ease. The lawyer explained.
We understand your story. However, even if the divorce is due to infidelity, property division will occur. And don't expect all your demands to be met. If there's a disagreement between the two of you, it's my job to mediate. I will make a fair judgment based on the facts. Please understand that.
If that's the case, then justice is on my side. Having an affair and giving birth to someone else's child is practically fraud. Should we call the police?
Ashley, that's terrible. We were happy about having a grandchild, and to find out it's not Noah's child.
Doing this makes me sad. The most pitiful one is the child who was born, right? Please make amends and at least raise the child properly.
They all spoke up.
No matter if a lawyer gets involved, what you did can never be forgiven. I'm entirely innocent and a victim. It's crucial how much Ashley reflects and apologizes to me. How about it? Do you feel remorse and are you ready to apologize?
Noah seemed entirely convinced of his victory. Now's the time. No. The one who needs to reflect and apologize is you, Noah.
What did you say?
Taken aback by my unexpected counterattack, Noah stood up suddenly. I continued calmly. Just give it up. I know everything.
What are you saying? I know who your affair partner is. I'll demand alimony from him too.
I decided it was time to present my trump card. Actually, I've invited someone here.
Who is it? One of your accomplices?
Noah shouted, fully ready for battle. I said in a teasing tone. You're not too bright, are you? I'm the victim here, so it's the witness.
A witness?
Thank you for waiting. Please, come in. As I spoke, two people entered through the door. Noah's mouth hung open in shock.
You are. And you are.
Yes, it's Victoria, the gynecologist, and my cousin Thomas.
Hello.
Victoria greeted.
Nice to meet you. I'm Ashley's cousin, Thomas.
Thomas introduced himself.
This guy is Ashley's affair partner. You're cousins, and you had a child together.
Please don't say such rude things. I live nearby, and I was just consulting because my wife Alice is pregnant. I've always seen Ashley like a friend, never as a woman.
Hey, that's a bit rude, isn't it, Thomas? I'll have to scold you later.
I'd like to say my piece soon.
Victoria interjected with a wry smile. Sorry, Victoria, please go ahead. I urged her to explain.
Thank you. So, to put it simply, the baby is undoubtedly Noah's and Ashley's child, according to the DNA test results.
What?
Noah exclaimed in shock.
But at that time, you said it wasn't my child.
You bribed the lab technician to falsify the results. When my husband, who is the hospital's chairman, confronted the technician, he broke down crying and confessed everything. We even recorded that confession.
I might confess too if confronted by her husband.
Damn it.
Noah bit his lip.
Patricia thought the test results were suspicious and brought your hair to request another test. Normally, we don't do that, but I got convinced after talking to her, Ashley's sister, and the retest confirmed the baby is indeed both of yours. And the technician who colluded with you has been fired. It's a matter of our hospital's credibility.
George was shocked by this.
Noah, why would you do such a thing?
George stood up and confronted Noah.
That's,
Instead of Noah, Patricia answered for him.
That's because Noah was the one having an affair?
What?
His parents gasped and were speechless.
When we went shopping in the city, Patricia saw Noah walking with an unknown woman. It was Saturday, and when she checked with Ashley, she said Noah was supposed to be working that day. So it seemed suspicious, and she asked Thomas to look into it.
Turn 2, Thomas said proudly.
Yeah, actually, I used to work part-time at a detective agency during my student days, so I'm good at investigations.
He began bragging.
And then we found plenty of evidence of the affair. Here's a recording of that time.
With that, Patricia played the voice recorder. It captured Noah and another woman's voices.
We'll get her DNA test and fake it as someone else's child. That way, it'll serve as evidence of the affair. There's a suitable guy. He's supposedly a cousin, but we have photos and can frame it as an affair. If it works out, I can push all the blame onto Ashley and get a divorce. I'll get alimony, and since she had a child, I can claim the house and land too. I'm the tragic hero. There's no problem with you and me being together. How's that? I'm a genius, right?
More like a villain than a genius, you know. You're like a bad guy from a drama, aren't you?
Their laughter followed on the recording. Stopping the recorder, Thomas added,
Your partner is a younger colleague from your own team at work.
Noah's face turned pale. With such compelling evidence presented, there was no room for him to argue.
Well, now that the facts are clear, it's my turn.
The lawyer said with a smirk. Then, pulling various documents from an envelope, he began to explain.
Here are Ashley's demands. She requests a divorce from Noah. She has stated that she will not pursue the matter of the DNA test falsification, so we will not address it here. We will seek alimony from Noah and the woman he was involved with. Additionally, we will demand property division and child support from Noah.
His parents were utterly stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Noah, intensely questioned by Patricia and me, was utterly devastated. I filled out the divorce papers, signed my part, and had Noah write his portion. The completed divorce papers were promptly submitted by the lawyer. After leaving the office, we celebrated with drinks at a nearby bar, and thus, I divorced Noah. I received a substantial amount in alimony and a lump sum for child support. By the way, I named my son Adam. It seems his parents had advanced the money. Noah was completely cut off from his parents. He is said to be repaying the debt little by little. Noah's affair partner was a woman from his company. Their affair during work hours came to light, and both were dismissed for violating company policies. Abandoned by that woman, he struggled to find new employment and is now working part-time at a gas station. I live with my son, Adam. He's still young, so I've taken a leave of absence to focus on childcare. It looks like we'll manage with the alimony for a while. Adam is adorable, and as I took photos and videos, my cousin Thomas edited them and uploaded them to a video site. This unexpectedly became quite popular. Thanks to the site's popularity, I even started earning money from the videos. The earnings were substantial, so I decided to save for Adam's future. My parenting is supported by those around me. Patricia, of course, and the ladies from my part-time job also helped. Especially the ladies, who would shop at the supermarket on my behalf when I couldn't go out. And the manager would deliver them to my home. In fact, the manager, who was also divorced, was encouraged by the ladies to get closer to me. When Adam turned 1, the manager proposed to me. Despite being a manager, he's down to earth, works hard, and treats everyone equally, which I really appreciated. Since he always delivered groceries to our home, it didn't take long for my fondness to turn into affection. I happily accepted his proposal. Adam had met him many times and was fond of him, and he seemed trustworthy because he cared about Adam. Although I accepted his proposal, we couldn't get married right away and went into a preparation period. Recently, Adam started calling him Dad. It seems I've managed to recapture the happiness I once let go. This time, I'm determined to hold on to this happiness tightly. As I watch Adam's peaceful sleeping face, I made this resolve.
Is something wrong? It feels like you two aren't getting along all of a sudden.
Nothing.
When I asked my husband, Michael, out of concern, he turned away. But I couldn't trust that answer. Because there's no way nothing's wrong. There must be some kind of tension between Michael and my daughter-in-law, Julia. What could they be hiding? Now that our son, Luke, has passed away, what could have happened between them? Luke was family-minded, always caring deeply about both Michael and Julia. I felt like it was my duty to protect the family that Luke cherished so much. But at the time, I never imagined that my feelings would lead to such consequences. My name is Susan Turner, a housewife in my 60s. I live with my husband Michael and our son's family. My son Luke has always been a bit frail, and every time he got sick as a child, I was the one who took care of him. Luke married a woman named Julia and started a family. However, Luke's frail health didn't improve much, so I thought it would be best for him if I was nearby in case anything happened. That's why I invited Luke and his wife to move in with us, and the 4 of us began living together. But to be honest, my relationship with Julia didn't go well. She always seemed to treat me as the enemy. Julia wasn't very proactive about helping with housework. Most of the chores were left to me, and even when she had free time, she never offered to help, preferring to relax in her room instead. Frustrated by this, I often found myself scolding her. Julia, you're a housewife too, so do your part. When I confronted her about her laziness, she would look at me with a face that seemed to say, "Here we go again," and let out a huge sigh.
Susan, this feels like you're just picking on me. I'm dealing with a lot too. Living with you and Michael is really stressful, you know? Do you get that?
I understand, but that's not the point. We agreed on living together, didn't we? I asked you several times if you were okay with it before you moved in. You said yes, didn't you? Knowing that living together might make Julia feel uncomfortable, I had repeatedly checked with her to ensure she was fine with it. So it was an arrangement we all agreed to. But now she was turning the tables, saying things like, Living together is too stressful, and it's hard being around you, Susan. It didn't sit right with me. If she didn't like the idea, she should have said so from the start. It was incredibly unfair of her to change her story and try to escape by saying, "I never wanted to do it in the first place," the moment things didn't go her way. I couldn't accept Julia's behavior, and over time, every little thing she did began to stand out, adding more and more to my stress. The bigger my frustration grew, the worse my attitude toward her became, and my words grew harsher. Eventually, Julia seemed to want nothing to do with me and would avoid even acknowledging me whenever we passed each other. And then a terrible tragedy struck. Luke collapsed at work. Thanks to his coworkers' quick actions, Luke was rushed to the hospital and admitted. When I heard the news, I rushed to the hospital, desperate to see him. The doctor, whom I'd met many times before, told me that Luke's condition was worse than I'd imagined. When I went into the hospital room, Luke was hooked up to all kinds of tubes. One look at him, and I could tell his condition wasn't good. Thankfully, he was conscious, but his voice was weak from the severity of his illness.
Mom.
When Luke saw me, he called out to me in a pained voice. Hearing that tone broke my heart. If I could take his place, I would. There was no reason for Luke to suffer like this. That thought kept swirling in my mind, making it hard for me to bear. From that day on, I visited Luke at the hospital every day. When Luke was feeling better, he would eat the fruit I brought him. But when he was feeling worse, he couldn't eat anything, and he was getting weaker by the day. However, Julia never once went to visit Luke in the hospital.
I'm heading out now.
Not only that, but she would dress up in flashy outfits and go out to have fun. Seeing Julia so unconcerned about Luke's condition made me furious, and I spoke to her sharply. "Julia, shouldn't you visit Luke in the hospital at least once?" Julia frowned.
Luke collapsed out of nowhere, and I'm hurting too. How can you not see that? You're so insensitive, Susan.
Stop turning away from reality. Luke is still suffering from his illness. As his wife, shouldn't you be there to support him? He said he's lonely because you haven't visited him. I couldn't hold back anymore, so I scolded her harshly. Julia just sighed dramatically.
Susan, stop nagging me. Just because Luke's in this condition doesn't mean you can take out your anger on me. That's not fair.
With that, she left the house. I never intended to take out my anger on her. I just wanted her to act like a decent person, like a wife, and do what's right. But my feelings never got through to Julia. And after a long battle with his illness, Luke passed away. He was only in his 40s, and his short life was over. It was so heartbreaking, so painful, that even during the funeral, I was barely conscious and couldn't stop crying. Luke was such a kind-hearted person, loved by many. During the funeral, there were countless people crying, mourning the loss of someone so special. He was my precious only son, a loving presence no one can replace. Losing him left a huge hole in my heart, but we still had things to deal with. We had to sit down with a lawyer to discuss things with Michael and Julia. The topic was Luke's assets. During his life, Luke had made a fortune in the stock market, amassing a wealth of $10 million. I had no idea how Luke's assets would be divided, even though I was his mother. But it seemed that Luke had left a will with his lawyer during his illness. According to the lawyer, Luke's $10 million estate was to be divided equally between Michael and me. It was a small gesture of gratitude for our unwavering support during his illness.
Just Susan and Michael? What about me?
Julia asked, clearly dissatisfied. The lawyer nodded in confirmation.
That's ridiculous.
Julia shouted in anger, but Michael managed to calm her down, and the situation was resolved peacefully. Afterward, as we started the process of helping Julia move, I began to feel something was off. The atmosphere between Julia and Michael was tense. They had always been close, even going out for meals together on occasion. Luke never seemed to mind, so I never brought it up, but the vibe between them now was just too strange. Did something happen? It feels like you two suddenly aren't getting along. I felt uneasy, so I decided to ask Michael.
Nothing.
Michael shook his head. But it was obvious that something was going on, and I couldn't stop wondering what it was. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to take action. After investigating, I discovered the truth. Michael and Julia were in the wrong. They weren't just father-in-law and daughter-in-law. What they did, betraying Luke and me, is something I can never forgive. So, I called them both into the living room, telling them I had something to discuss.
What's this about?
I want you to take a look at this. I said that and showed them the screen of my phone. Michael and Julia looked puzzled, but when they saw the video, they both gasped. The footage showed the living room. Michael and Julia entered the frame, and they were having a tense conversation.
Julia, come on. Don't be mad. I never expected Luke to leave a will like that.
Julia ignored Michael's words. Growing impatient, Michael continued.
Julia, I can't do this without you. I'll give you part of the inheritance later. I'll divorce Susan, and then will you marry me?
At that, Julia, who had been cold until then, smiled and hugged Michael.
I knew you'd understand, Michael. Once you divorce Susan, we'll be happy together.
After Julia said that, the two walked out of the camera frame. This video was clear evidence that the two of them were having an affair. Neither I nor Luke had ever imagined that Michael and Julia would be involved in something like this. Something beyond anger was welling up inside me as I thought of how these two had betrayed us. Without knowing anything, Luke entrusted his inheritance to Michael. This is the result of trusting Michael as a reliable father. There's no way Luke could rest in peace knowing this. Do you really think you can get away with this? You both know there will be consequences, right? When I asked that, their faces turned pale. Julia stepped forward to defend herself.
Susan, this video is a mistake or something.
A mistake? That's impossible. This footage came from a camera I set up myself. There was no way it could have captured something by mistake. I looked over at Michael, and he averted his eyes awkwardly. His refusal to face the truth only added to my frustration. I couldn't take it anymore, and I decided it was time to begin my act of revenge.
It's not true. I never had an affair. Michael came to me.
Julia tried to pin the blame on Michael. Hearing that, Michael's face flushed red, and he blurted out,
That's not true. Julia came on to me. I knew it was wrong to get involved with my son's wife, but she kept coming at me, so I had no choice.
What?
At that, Julia yelled and grabbed Michael by his collar. Her face was contorted with rage.
What do you mean you had no choice? You're the one who made the move, promising we could keep it a secret.
Stop accusing me. Susan, you have to believe me. I never meant for any of this to happen.
Susan, I'm telling the truth. Please believe me.
The two of them grabbed each other's collars, hurling insults and trying to win my favor. Their behavior was so disgusting that I couldn't help but sigh. I had no intention of siding with either of them. It didn't matter who initiated the affair. What was clear was that they had both betrayed Luke and me. They both deserved to be punished. They had pretended nothing was wrong while betraying us. Luke had trusted them both, especially Michael, giving him half of his $10 million inheritance. That money was a token of Luke's appreciation for Michael. Even after receiving Luke's inheritance, Michael didn't end his relationship with Julia. He was even planning to divorce me so he could be with her, and I was furious. But I couldn't help but feel that Julia, who was excited and thrilled by Michael's words, was equally guilty. Watching Michael and Julia blame each other, desperately trying to avoid punishment and protect themselves, was truly disgusting. How could I have ever considered these people my family? I was even disgusted with myself for my foolishness. But despite how I felt, the two of them continued to argue. Watching them pull each other down was truly ridiculous.
Michael, weren't you going to take my side? You said you'd divorce Susan and be with me. Did you forget what you promised?
Julia, unable to hold back her frustration, yelled at Michael. Michael, clearly flustered by her words, stammered and snapped back at Julia.
Stop it. I'm not the bad guy here. It's your fault. Stop blaming me.
Michael's shout echoed through the living room. I was so shocked by the volume that I froze in place. But Julia's face turned red, and she fired back at him.
I'm not at fault. You're the one to blame, Michael. Stop making excuses.
With that, Julia collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Her constant claim that she wasn't at fault showed just how desperate she was. But Michael didn't hold back, continuing to hurl cruel words at her.
You tramp. Playing with people's emotions and then acting like a victim? That's unforgivable.
His words were harsh, far too cold to be said to anyone. If someone had said those words to me, I wouldn't have been able to recover. But Julia didn't back down. Instead, she screamed at Michael, her face turning an even deeper shade of red.
How dare you talk to me like that? You enjoyed it too. Who's the real victim here?
What did you just say?
With those words, they glared at each other. The tension in the air was so thick, it felt like a fight could break out at any moment. If I let this go on, they'd likely end up in another physical fight, hurling insults and completely ignoring me as they tore each other apart. Watching them like this could have been entertaining, but that wasn't the main point of my revenge. My real goal wasn't to turn Michael and Julia against each other. I had something much bigger in mind. If I let this continue, I wouldn't be able to achieve what I truly wanted. I believed that unless I saw this revenge through to the end, Luke would never rest in peace. This was why I had to finish this. And now, I was approaching the final act of this revenge story. All that was left was to deliver the final blow that would send them both into complete despair. Then I will be satisfied to let them go. To complete my plan, I opened my mouth and spoke. Sorry to interrupt your argument, but I'm thinking of getting a divorce. Both of them gasped in shock. Michael, in particular, looked absolutely stunned, his face draining of color.
Susan, you can't be serious. Tell me you're lying. If you leave me, I'll be all alone. Please, tell me this isn't true.
He pleaded, bowing his head in desperation. But unfortunately for him, I was entirely serious. I didn't know when it started, but the fact that Michael had betrayed me and had an affair with Julia was undeniable. If I had to consider whether I could continue living with him as his wife, the answer was a definite no. I wasn't that strong, and more importantly, my love for Michael had completely vanished the moment I found out about his affair. Long ago, I had already lost the will to stay married to him. But Michael, ignoring my feelings, kept apologizing, desperately trying to win back my favor. Watching him grovel like that made Julia chuckle.
Look at you. This is what happens when you try to pin everything on me. You're getting what you deserve.
Julia laughed at Michael. But it seemed she had misunderstood something. I never said that Michael would be the only one punished. And yet, Julia seemed to believe she'd walk away unscathed, which made me tilt my head in confusion. Julia, you'll also have to face the consequences for your actions.
What?
Julia cried out in shock at my words. Then she collapsed to the floor, clinging to my feet.
We're family, right, Susan? How can you not forgive me? Haven't we worked together as a family all this time? Have you forgotten all we've been through?
Julia pleaded desperately. I couldn't understand a word of what she was saying. Since she married Luke and moved in with us, every day had been a nightmare. Julia never helped with the housework, lounging around all the time. And when I asked her to help, she accused me of bullying her as a mother-in-law. I didn't want to strain the relationship between her and Luke, so I kept quiet and did what I had to do. Yet now, Julia seemed to have conveniently forgotten all that and was acting as if we'd always gotten along. Her delusion made me say, "Huh?" out loud. Life with you was hell, Julia. You never helped with anything, always left everything to me, and when I asked you to do your part, you accused me of bullying you. In what world were we ever close? I always thought we had a terrible relationship. As I said this, Julia's face went pale. The idea that I would accept such a messy excuse and forgive her just because she thought we had gotten along well was so absurd that I couldn't help but let out yet another big sigh, one of many. Julia flinched at my sign, nervously watching me for any sign of anger. Both Luke and I had been betrayed by these two. I had wanted to believe in them. If possible, I had wanted to stay in the family forever. Even after Luke passed, I had hoped we could come together and support each other as family. But they shattered even that hope. What was left was a miserable ending. We had been betrayed and deceived by the two of them all along. It was especially tragic for Luke, who unknowingly entrusted his inheritance to Michael. I couldn't help but feel sorry for him. If he had known what Michael was doing, he never would have made such a foolish decision. If only I had realized it sooner, none of this would have happened. But it was too late now. Luke was gone. I will never forgive either of you. No matter what happens, you will get the punishment you deserve. Even if you cry and beg, I won't stop. I'll drag you both down to the depths of hell. So, be prepared. I won't let either of you escape." When I said that, they sat there stunned, as if they couldn't take my words. Their expressions were so ridiculous that I almost laughed, but staying in the same space as them was unbearable. I packed my things and left the house. Neither of them tried to stop me. My words must have shaken them to the core. After that, I divorced Michael. Then, I sued him for damages for his affair with Julia. Thanks to Luke's inheritance, Michael was able to pay the settlement quickly. But Julia was a different story. She didn't receive any part of the inheritance and had no one to turn to for help. There was no way she could pay the damages I demanded. Just as I expected, Julia started clinging to Michael after that. She would constantly try to contact him, demanding a share of the inheritance and causing a scene. Michael, overwhelmed by Julia's persistence, had become mentally exhausted. As for me, I moved to a new place and started living on my own. After years of living with Michael and Luke's family, it was a bit lonely, but I couldn't imagine living with those toxic people anymore. Surprisingly, living alone turned out to be quite peaceful. I no longer felt tied down and could enjoy each day at my own pace. Soon, I plan to visit Luke's grave to report what's happened. It'll take time before I can fully move on, but I'm determined to keep moving forward, one step at a time.